I had been secretly married to my CEO husband for 6 years, but he still would not let our son call him dad. After he missed our son's birthday again because of his secretary, I took out the divorce agreement and left with our son for good. The usually calm man lost control and stormed into the office to demand where we were. This time, neither my son nor I would come back. The morning it ended began like every other morning of the 6 years before it, which was the thing about endings that nobody warned you about. They arrived wearing the same clothes as ordinary days. I submitted my resignation letter to Mr. Clark and told him I was going abroad to join my husband in Australia, which was the cleanest lie I had ever told because it contained a true thing inside a false one. I was leaving, and it was because of my husband, and neither of us would ever live in this building again. Mr. Clark said that made sense, that raising a child alone must be hard, that they had all assumed I was a single mother. I smiled and told him I was not. But soon I would be, and it would be the most accurate description of my life that anyone had ever offered. I walked out of his office and into the hallway, and straight into Matthew and Quilla, moving toward me at the pace of people who had nowhere urgent to be, which was its own kind of information. Quilla was holding a report in one hand and the hem of Matthew's suit jacket in the other with the easy possessiveness of someone who had never had to hide anything. 7 years ago I had been Matthew Grant's personal secretary. One chaotic night, after too much drinking, we had created a child together, and then spent 6 years building a marriage that existed entirely in private, which was another way of saying a marriage that existed for my benefit and Matthew's convenience, and not at all for Tyler's, who was 5 years old and still asked me every few weeks whether Dad would come home for dinner tonight, with the patient optimism of a child who has not yet learned to stop asking. Matthew looked at me in the hallway with a cold expression and said Miss Langley in the tone he reserved for employees he was reminding of their place. I said Mr. Grant. He gave a small nod and kept walking. I watched him lean down to say something gentle to Quilla and instinctively shield her when someone passed too close, and I thought, 6 years of this and not once. My phone showed a message from Tyler on his smartwatch. Mom, will Dad come home for my birthday? I texted Matthew from 15 feet away and watched him check his phone across the hall and put it down without expression in under 3 seconds. I laughed at myself quietly in the way you laugh when the joke is old and you are the only audience left for it. I thought, Whitney, get a grip. You should have known. I put my phone in my pocket and walked away and thought, Matthew, soon you'll be free. I picked Tyler up from kindergarten and he asked about his dad before he had finished climbing into my arms, with the bright, uncomplicated hope of a child whose faith had not yet been educated into something more realistic. My eyes filled on the crowded street and then my phone buzzed and Matthew had replied, I'm free. I'll come home. I felt the specific joy of someone who knows better and feels it anyway, the joy that arrives before the knowledge can intercept it. I told Tyler his dad was coming. He clapped and jumped and I held him and thought, maybe this time. I had been thinking maybe this time for 6 years and the thought still arrived fresh every time, which was something I intended to stop doing but not tonight. I cooked a full meal. Tyler finished his homework early and sat at the table in his birthday hat waiting with the focused patience of a 5-year-old who has decided that patience is the correct strategy. 1 hour passed. 2, 3. I sent messages that were not answered. Tyler looked at me with the hesitant eyes of a child who has begun to understand something he does not have the vocabulary for yet, and asked if Dad was too busy. I said it was okay. I said I would always be with him. He asked me to put his birthday hat on for him, and I reached for it, and my phone showed me Quilla's latest social media post. A beautifully plated dish at a high-end restaurant, no faces visible, but in the corner of the frame, on the hand that held the wine glass, Matthew's wedding ring, the one we had chosen together. The one he wore on his pinky so no one would know he was married. On Tyler's 6th birthday, my husband was at a candlelit dinner with his girlfriend wearing the symbol of our marriage where only someone who already knew would recognize it. I put Tyler's birthday hat on his head and sang him happy birthday and watched him blow out his candles and told him he could make any wish he wanted, and he closed his eyes very seriously for a long time before he blew. I did not ask what he wished for. I already knew I was going to make it true regardless. That night after Tyler was asleep, I took out the divorce agreement I had prepared 3 weeks earlier, signed my portion, and placed it in the envelope addressed to Matthew's attorney. Then I packed 2 suitcases, one for Tyler, one for myself. I did not pack everything. I packed what we needed and what mattered and left the rest because the rest was furniture inside a life I was finished with. I booked a hotel for the week and called my sister, and then I sat in the kitchen of the apartment Matthew paid for but never came to and drank a cup of tea and thought about the version of myself who had believed 6 years ago and every day since that if she was patient enough and present enough and undemanding enough, eventually the private marriage would become a real one. I was 31 years old, Tyler was 5. We had time. Here was the first twist, the one that arrived the next morning from a direction I had not anticipated. Matthew came to the office. Not to my apartment. Not with any acknowledgement of the divorce agreement, but to the office. Because he had apparently called Mr. Clark when I didn't come in and Mr. Clark had told him I had resigned. And this information had produced in Matthew a reaction that 6 years of marriage had not. He arrived at my desk at 9:15, which was where I was sitting clearing out my personal items, and he stood in front of me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, which was the expression of a man encountering a variable he had not included in any of his calculations. He said, "You resigned." I said, "Yes." He said, "You didn't tell me." I looked at him and thought about Tyler asking if Dad was too busy, and Tyler's birthday hat, and the wedding ring in Quilla's social media post, and I said, "You didn't come to your son's birthday." He said nothing. I said, "I texted you. You put your phone down in 3 seconds and went to dinner." He still said nothing, but something was moving across his face that I did not have the energy to interpret charitably anymore. I handed him the envelope and said his attorney had the matching copy and went back to clearing my desk. What happened next was the second twist, which was Matthew not leaving. He stood at my desk for 11 minutes while I packed a box. He did not speak for most of it. Then he said, "I didn't know you were going to actually do it." I said, "I know." "That's the problem," he said. "I thought you understood the situation." I put down the photo of Tyler I had been wrapping in paper and I looked at Matthew directly and said, "I understood the situation perfectly. Our son didn't. He's 5 years old and he asks me every week if Dad is coming home, and I've been answering for you for 6 years and I'm not going to do it anymore." Matthew looked at the photo of Tyler in my hand. His face did something complicated. I had seen his face do things over 6 years and I had learned to interpret the complications, but I was genuinely trying to stop doing that, so I looked back at my box instead. The third twist was Quilla, which I had not expected and which changed the shape of the story in a way I was still processing 3 weeks later. She came to find me, not in the office but at the hotel, which meant someone had told her where I was, which meant the information chain around my departure was more active than I had known. She knocked on the door on a Wednesday afternoon, and I opened it because the knock was not Matthew's knock and I was curious. She stood in the hallway, looking like a woman who has also been having a hard month, and said she needed to tell me something. I let her in. She sat on the edge of the desk chair and told me without preamble that she had not known Matthew was married until 4 days ago. That he had told her he was a widower. That the ring he wore on his pinky he had described as his late wife's ring, kept for sentimental reasons. That when she had posted the restaurant photo and her friend had asked about the ring in the comments, she had reached out to Matthew to ask about it, and he had told her the truth, or a version of the truth. And she had then spent 4 days making phone calls and doing research and had found me. She said, "I am so sorry." I said, "He told you he was a widower?" She said, "Yes." I sat with that for a moment. The specific cruelty of it, the architecture required. Not just hiding a marriage but constructing a dead wife, wearing the ring as proof of grief rather than commitment. I said, "How long?" She said, 2 years. I said, "Tyler is 5. She closed her eyes briefly. I said, "It's not your fault." She said, "I know. I'm still sorry." Quilla's attorney contacted Matthew's attorney the following week with her own documentation, which reframed several aspects of the divorce proceedings in ways that Matthew's legal team had not anticipated. 2 women who had both been deceived by the same man in different directions turned out to have significantly more combined leverage than either of them had separately, which was not a situation Matthew had apparently modeled when he was constructing his parallel lives. His attorney called Grace, my attorney, to discuss a more expedited settlement timeline. Grace called me and said, "He wants this done quickly." I told her to take her time. The settlement was final 8 weeks after Tyler's birthday. The apartment, which Matthew had paid for, became Tyler's home, because the court took a particular view of a father who had declined to let his son call him dad for 6 years while maintaining a parallel relationship built on the fiction of a dead wife. Matthew received scheduled visitation rights that he would have to actually show up for, which was a structural change from the previous arrangement, where showing up had been optional and frequently declined. Tyler did not fully understand what had changed. He understood that we had moved back to our apartment, that Dad was going to come on Saturdays now, and that Mom seemed like someone who was sleeping better. The first Saturday Matthew came, he stood in the doorway with the same complicated face he had been wearing since the morning at the office, and Tyler looked at him for a moment and then said, "Hi, Dad," the first time. Just like that, unprompted, because Tyler had always wanted to say it and had been waiting for someone to make it make sense that he could. Matthew looked at me over Tyler's head. I looked back. I thought about 6 years and a birthday hat and a wedding ring in a corner of a photo, and a 5-year-old's wish over birthday candles. I thought about what I had said to Mr. Clark. I was not a single mother, but soon I would be. I was, now, and it was the most accurate description of my life anyone had offered, and it was also fine, because single meant I was the one who showed up, which I had always been, and now I was the only one Tyler had to count on, which meant he would not be counting and then not counting again on the same cold math of the hallway where his father had put down a phone in 3 seconds and walked away. I said, "He'll be back next Saturday, Tyler." Tyler said, "Okay." Then he took Matthew's hand and pulled him inside to show him something. A drawing he had done at school, ordinary and urgent and 5 years old. And I went to the kitchen and finished making lunch and thought that this Just this. The ordinary forward motion of a life that had been allowed to be honest about what it was enough. It was, in fact, more than enough. It was everything I had been waiting for permission to want.